Natural gas has been often touted as a bridge fuel in the energy transition debate. And as gas markets are becoming commoditized, less regional and more international in light of greater flexibility afforded by LNG markets, the emission intensity of the LNG value chain is attracting more scrutiny. This has given rise to carbon-neutral LNG, or what some call green LNG, where emissions from supply and consumption are accounted for and offset through carbon credits from emission abatement projects. Of course, offsets alone are not enough, as they should be coupled with more profound efforts in reducing emissions throughout the LNG value chain. Here with us to discuss the potential and challenges of carbon-neutral LNG is Mehdi Shannoufi, Head of LNG Origination and Market Development at Shell. Mehdi, welcome to the show and thank you for taking the time. Let me begin with asking you this. To what extent do you think that the carbon footprint of LNG cargoes and other specific environmental criteria will become an important differentiator for both buyers and sellers in the future?
We are indeed witnessing a major shift in mindset at societal, governmental and corporate level. Greenhouse gas emissions represented in CO2 equivalent, for simplicity, will become table stakes. But to some extent, the holistic ecological footprint of our activities on Earth's primary ecosystem services will become very important differentiators too. Obviously, as more solutions to avoid, reduce and offset emissions develop at scale economically, the industry will evolve. But until then, what we can do is compensate through nature-based solutions.
How big is current market activity, Mehdi, relating to carbon-neutral LNG in the last 2 or 3 years? Where is it largely heading to, and who is largely supplying it?
A bit of context of how it all came together, if you don't mind, Nasser. It really all started from discussions on ways to address the growing concerns around emissions, air quality, and the changing societal expectations between like-minded people within the industry. So we were post-Paris Agreement, but as amateur but passionate nature enthusiasts, we would discuss ways to better utilize nature and Earth ecosystem services and invest in solutions that have an immediate impact on carbon sequestration and have a wider benefit, like improving air quality, soil quality, or biodiversity. So there was a very strong link to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, for sure. So our discussions centered around finding ways to incentivize human and financial capital flows towards an industry that has its own challenge, yet with a strong complementary one with our own. So this is the agriculture and forestry industry. So what happened next is that we had to make this transparent, auditable, affordable, and sustainable. With this in mind, we just set off with the first carbon-neutral cargoes with our partners in Japan, Tokyo Gas, in Korea, GS Energy, and swiftly thereafter CPC and CNOOC in China and Taiwan. The current market, we started with 3 in 2019, jumped to 7 in 2020, and I think year to date we're almost at 17. So I wouldn't be surprised if we almost triple by the end of the year compared to last year.
Mm-hmm. Over LNG cargo's life cycle, what are the stages with the biggest emissions, and where do you think lies the biggest opportunity to reduce those emissions?
Greenhouse gas offsetting or carbon neutral is not really fully defined, but we're working with the industry body, GII, GNL, and a wide range of stakeholders, including auditors, to clarify the framework. But for now, at Shell at least, it represents the act of offsetting the full life cycle of our products from the wellhead all the way to the burner tips. In LNG, the highest generation comes at the combustion side. So this is more than 70%. Exploration and production rarely exceed 20 to 25%, and the rest is in the shipping component. So if you follow the avoid, reduce, and then offset principles, the biggest opportunity to reduce emissions is in the efficiency of the power plants, of course, the liquefaction technology used, or the renewable energy that can be used to power the liquefaction, as we did in Canada LNG, for example.
So what are the biggest challenges, Mahdi, in decarbonizing the LNG value chain?
You mentioned some of them in your introduction. First, what gets measured gets done. So the priority is to collaborate along the value chain to measure, report, and certify the greenhouse gas emissions transparently. Work in progress, as it is complex, as you highlighted, with global supplies and global consumption. But we are, as industry participants, really working hard with GIGNL to get to the bottom of this. The second challenge is scaling up technologies, be it CCUS, hydrogen, or very large-scale renewables. And then thirdly, I think when it comes to scaling up the offset market, we are seeing a lot more interest. Carbon neutral LNG demand growth did have its intended impact on the supply side of nature-based credits. However, we're also seeing a growth in investment and scalability of diversified types of projects. So it's good to see research and development and innovation in soil carbon, coral reef credits, regenerative agriculture, or blue carbon, like we saw recently in Abu Dhabi for the last few years.
So Mahdi, how important is it for the growth of carbon neutral LNG that all cargoes, regardless if it's green or not, are required to put forth detailed information about the emissions associated with their production and delivery?
This will become, in my view, table stake by the end of the decade. As we've seen, the carbon neutral cargoes have been incredibly effective at putting a price or cost on carbon emissions and to some extent ecosystem impact in our market, and getting the industry to ask who pays for what. So measurement will be done for sure by the end of the decade.
So Mahdi, how can we talk about carbon neutral LNG today while there is no clear agreed upon definition as of yet governing measuring and reporting of carbon emissions?
It is one of the challenges, but it's being fixed. We are working again with GIGNL and in some jurisdictions with the right technology and proper certification bodies and legal framework. This will come much faster and it will be mainstream in my view.
Carbon neutral LNG is, of course, sold at a premium, but what are some of the innovative ways that the industry can reduce that cost?
As an economist, my simple answer will always be around the market forces, fair competition, and sometimes government incentives. You probably heard about the PetroChina Shell first long-term carbon neutral contract. It's a very important because this enables securing funding for a long period and incentivize again this human and financial capital to flow towards investing in offsets, innovate and compete. And we've seen the impact on innovation on any industry. the last few years were offset industry itself.
If the future will favor suppliers who have a competitive edge based on their carbon intensity, does that mean that towards the end of this decade, no greenfield projects will get final investment decisions and only low-cost brownfield expansion projects will get the go-ahead?
It's a very difficult question. I can't predict the future that far. I think the demand is dispersed and the supply as well. So there will be a bit of everything. But the tendency will be indeed to focus on the lowest cost expansion, but also the greeniest or greener expansion or new FID.
Mahdi Shannoufi, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us on the show.
Thank you very much, Nasser, for your time as well.